Tettenhall Wood School is a school for autistic children and young adults, and we have set this podcast up to provide our pupils with a fantastic opportunity to develop a range of skills whilst interviewing top sportsmen and women from a variety of different sports. Joining us today on the TWS Sports Podcast is a former professional cricketer. He played 105 test matches for Australia, as well as being the head coach of them. Welcome to the podcast, Justin Langer.
Hello, guys. Thanks for the invitation. My friend Steve Waugh was on your podcast a little while ago, and he told me it's the best podcast in the whole world. So because of that, I'm very honoured that you've invited me on to speak.
Brilliant, and it's a pleasure to have you. Yes, we've had Steve on. He was just before the Ashes in the summer, which was really good. And we've also had your good friend Matthew Hayden on a few years ago. What other Australians you've had? John Eales, it's rugby, but former Wallaby captain.
Yes.
So a few Australians, which is good.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, Mason.
We like to start our podcast with some random questions. Before we start talking about your career, are you ready?
I'm ready to go.
Who is the most famous person in your phone book?
Well, last weekend, I went to Coldplay. They had 2 concerts here in Perth, and I got to meet Chris Martin.
Wow.
And so now he's my famous photo, and he actually, and I'll send it to you, Mason, to have a look at. Last week during the Coldplay concert, he sang a song about Western Australia where I live, and he's used my name. So you guys, I'll send you the video to show you, and that would be one of the most famous people in my black book at the moment.
So next time he comes, you have to get on stage and sing it with him.
Yeah, maybe. I'd be a bit too shy to do that, but it was the Coldplay concert was absolutely unbelievable. I was lucky to go to both nights here at Optus Stadium in Perth. It was the greatest entertainment I've ever seen. It was brilliant.
Okay, if you could trade lives with anyone for one day and one day only, who would it be and why?
If I could trade lives with one person, I would say it would be, gee whiz, good question. It would be the famous surfer Kelly Slater. And I've never surfed, but I live in Perth and I live right near the beach. And I've always wanted to learn how to surf. My old opening partner, Maddie Hayden, loves surfing. My daughter's boyfriends love surfing, but I've never been able to. But if I could change places for one, that'd be Kelly Slater, the great world champion surfer.
If you could have any superpower, what would you have and why?
If I could have any superpower, I would be able to become invisible.
Yeah, that's a
could see me. That would be my superpower if I had a choice.
Think of all the conversations you could hear and all the places you could sneak into.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you for answering them, Justin.
We want to take your back to the beginning, a talk about your childhood. What are your memories if growing up, and did you always want to be a cricketer?
Well, yes, I grew up in Western Australia in a place called Perth. And my uncle Robbie played World Series cricket for Australia. And I remember he used to come home and tell us all these stories about, I was only 7 years old when my uncle Robbie told me these stories about World Series cricket. And I used to hear about people like Viv Richards, who was the great West Indian. They used to call him the Master Blaster, Mason. He was like a big West Indian, and he was my hero. And I used to hear all these amazing stories about Viv Richards. Then I used to watch the TV and watch all these amazing cricketers play. And then when I was 11 years old, there was another legend called Dennis Lilly. He was a fast bowler for Australia. I was 11 years old, and over here we have the Boxing Day Test match at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. And when I was 11, the last ball of the day, Dennis Lilly ran into bowl and he bowled Viv Richards on the last ball of the day. And all the Australian cricket, there was about 90,000 people going crazy in the grandstand. All the Australians were walking off, and I had a thing called a baggy green cap, which is the cap. You can see that in my office here. If you look up on the screen,
very
see
nice.
Up on the shelf, that's a baggy green cap. And I thought when I was 11 years old, imagine if I could have one of those one day, all because Dennis Lilly bowled Viv Richards. So I think growing up, I always dreamed about it. I had two brothers and a little sister, and we always played cricket in the backyard and down on the beach. I always played it in club cricket with my little teammates. So I think I always did want to play cricket from a young age, mainly because I loved watching it on the television, and I had lots of heroes that I aspired to be like.
You start your career at Western Australia. What are your memories from your first season as a professional cricketer?
Well, a couple of things I remember. First, I only found out the night before that I was going to make my debut for Western Australia because someone got injured. Jeff Marsh, who's the father of Mitchell Marsh, who just did very well in the World Cup for Australia, and Sean Marsh, who also played for Australia. His dad was a very good cricketer. He not only played for Australia, but he was also the coach of Australia at one point. But he got injured. He hurt his shoulder, and I got asked to come and replace him the next day at the Wacker, which is in Perth. And there's a guy by the name of Merv Hughes. Merv Hughes had this big moustache and he had big round tummy, and he used to bowl fast, and he used to get really grumpy, Mason. You should have seen how angry he used to get. And he was running in and bowling bouncers, and he was hitting me on the helmet, hitting me on the shoulders, and telling me I was ba 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 like all fast bowlers, talking absolute rubbish. And that's what I remember about that debut test. And then what I remember is the day after I made my debut, and it was the first time I got paid to play cricket. I went to the shop and I bought myself a new watch. And I love that watch. And even my daughter now, who's 27, I gave it to her as a gift, and she wears that watch even today every day to work. So I remember facing the fast bowlers. I remember being surprised to get selected. And then I remember with my first paycheck as a professional cricketer, I bought this watch, which I loved, and my daughter still wears today.
Amazing. Well, and speaking of debuts, your Australian debut was eventful as well. So facing West Indies, you came in at 1-for-1 and faced Ian Bishop. Can you tell us about your very first ball in Test cricket?
Well, the first thing I'll tell you, the very first ball in Test cricket, I must have told the story in front of big audiences about at least 500 times. And what happened, my first ball, Mason, there's a guy by the name of Ian Bishop, and Ian Bishop was about a 6'10" bowler, and he was from Trinidad, and he bowled very, very, very fast. It was scary. And my first ball in Test cricket, you know what happened? I took my eye off the ball and I got hit straight in the back of the helmet. And I had blood pouring out of the back of my head, and there was all the West Indies come and looked after me, and it was like a boxer who'd been knocked out, and I got the jelly legs. But back in those days, he didn't talk about concussion or anything like that. So I kept batting, and I ended up getting 20 runs in the first innings. And in the second innings, I come into bat 3 as well. And I got out for 54. And I was the second last batsman out, and we lost by 1 run. And our great captain, Alan Border, who achieved everything in the game of cricket except he never beat West Indies. And after we lost that Test match, it was another thing. Alan Border, who did everything in the game, the one thing he didn't beat the West Indies. And I felt really disappointed that we fell 1 run short in losing that first Test.
We watched the clips yesterday in preparation for chatting to you, and Well, it's a bit before your time, Mason, but David Boone is at the other end, wasn't he? I imagine he wasn't very helpful, was he?
It was so funny because what happened? Well, this is what happened. First, Ian Bishop was running. His run-up was so long, it was almost came from the sight screen. And he was running in like Usain Bolt. And then standing right close to him is a guy by Desmond Haynes from Barbados. And before I faced the ball, Desmond Haynes was saying, "Hey, Bishy, he's scared, Bishy, he's scared, Bishy, he's scared, Bishy." And then another guy sitting, I was close to me, Mason, you imagine that you're me, and Chris is another guy called Keith Arthur, and he was standing that close here, and he was looking at Ian Bishop going, "Kill him, Bishy, kill him, Bishy, kill him, Bishy." There's a guy by the name of Brian Lara who was standing at the other sight screen, at the other, that's how far back, how fast he was bowling. Brian Lara was going, "Hey, Bishy, boy should be in high school, not playing test cricket." So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and so I haven't even faced the ball. And then what happened? First ball bouncer hits me, bang, hits me in the back of the head. And all of a sudden, a guy called David Boone, who was very tough, he walks down and he had a big moustache and he used to smoke cigarettes and chew chewing gum. And he put his arm around me and he goes, "Hey, JL, there's no heroes in Test cricket, son. Retire hurt." And I said, "Oh, Mr. Boone, what do you mean retire hurt? I've got my mum and my dad have flown over from Perth to Adelaide. I've got my brothers and my sister. I've got my friend Nigel Ray from London's flowing over to watch me bat. I've got the commentators up in the grandstand. Desmond Haynes thinks I'm scared. Keith Arthurton wants to kill me. Brian Lara thinks I should be in high school." I said, "Mr. Boone, if you don't mind, we'll get through tonight." He said, "Remember, there's no heroes in Test cricket, son." Next morning, third ball. If you don't believe me, Mason, look it up on the internet tonight or today. Third ball of day 2, 1992, Australia versus West Indies. David Boone's batting, and I'm still batting with him. A bloke by the name of Curtly Ambrose from Antigua runs into bowl. Let's go over this ball. Hits the pitch, pops up, and hits David Boone right on the end of the elbow. This hurts. Like you get hit on the ball on the end of the elbow by a hard cricket ball at 140 kilometres an hour. Hits him on the end of the elbow, and David Boone's gone down, holding his arm. But Mason,
yeah,
not only am I tough and talented, I'm also an opportunist. Do you know what I did? I put my collar up like this, walked down, put my arm around David Boone, and I said, "Hey, Mr. Boone, no heroes in Test cricket, son. Retire hurt." And he looked at me with these puppy dog eyes. He said, "I think you're right, son." And he did. He walked off the ground and retired hurt. And that was my first ball in Test cricket.
Well, that's a very eventful first ball and first few overs. So it's always a good story. Good story.
What does getting your first baggy green cap mean to you?
Oh, hang on. I'm even going to show it to you. One sec. See, to most people, this is just a little piece of cloth, and it probably only costs about, I don't know, $20 to 10 quid, 20 quid to put together. It's just a piece of cloth. But to me, that's what I dreamed about. I dreamed it when, before the late great Shane Warne, a good friend of mine, he died. His baggy green cap, one of the banks over here bought it for $1 million, £500,000. That's how much it means to people in Australia. So the best thing about this baggy green was no longer was it a baggy green or the baggy green. Now it's my baggy green, and no one can ever take it off me. And this is one of the first ones I got. It's brand new. But the one I had that I used more for 100 test match, you should see it, Mason. It smells horrible. It's sweaty and it's dusty and it's had beer poured all over it and it's had all sorts of stuff. It's been to all the different parts of the world. I wore it for 100 tests. It's got blood on it. but I've got that in another room in my house, and it's in a frame. So I keep that in a frame so that no one can go near that. But the baggy green cap, it's only a piece of cloth, but it's a great symbol, and it's something that I'm very proud to have one of.
How important is luck in your career, and can you think of a time where you have been lucky?
Oh, luck's so important. Let me give you an example. In 2001, I was opened the batting for the first time, and I was 31 years old. I got dropped for the Ashes tour, and I got dropped for the first Test match. I'm 31. I thought that's the end of my career. I'll never play for Australia again. Anyway, I've been training really hard, and I finally, in the 5th Test at the Oval in London. Where do you guys live?
Wolverhampton, so Birmingham, Edgbaston, not far from there.
And Birmingham, okay. So we were down at London in Surrey, and Michael Slater got dropped for the Test match. I went to open the batting with my best mate, Matty Hayden, for the first time. So we walk out to bat. I think this is my last opportunity to play for Australia. I've never opened before. And I walk out, I'm all relaxed, I'm happy. Anyway, when I was on 7 runs, a guy by the name of Andy Caddick, who played for England, I played with him at Somerset, he's my friend now. I used to didn't like him when I played against him either. He was a clown. He used to talk so much rubbish, but he's become a great friend of mine now. Anyway, when I was on 7, he bowled me a short ball, and I pulled it as hard as I could. And my other friend, Mark Ramprakash, who I played with at Middlesex, he was at bat pad, and he took this spectacular catch, throws it up in there. I'm walking off the ground. So I'm only on 7. So that's the end of my career. I'll never play cricket for Australia again. I get quarter of the way off the ground, and Matty Hayden's going, JL, come back, come back. I'm looking around, what's gone on? No ball. It was a no ball. Andy Caddick bowled a no ball. And guess what? I got 100.
Wow.
Luck. I would never, if I were out for 7, I'd never played. And then what happened? We come back to Australia, and they're thinking, oh, we better give him one more chance because he got 100 in against England. We're playing New Zealand at the Gabba, which is in Queensland. A guy by the name of Chris Cairns, who passed away also recently, bowled the very first ball of the first Test of the summer, bowled a big in-swinger, hit me straight on the front pad, big appeal for LBW. The umpire gave me not out. It was plum. Guess what happened next? I got another 100. Then we go to the second Test. We're in Brisbane, and Chris Cairns bowled a ball, and I cut one, and it was the easiest catch. I went like this, the easiest catch you've ever seen, to a guy called Mark Richardson. I was on 5 at point. Guess what happened? He dropped it. He dropped a sitter. Guess what happened next? I got another 100. The point is, you need luck. Mason, you need luck in this game. You've got to work hard. I believe 2 things, and you've heard this, probably heard it before. The harder you work, the luckier you get. But I also believe the harder you work, the harder it is to surrender. You don't give up opportunities. So yeah, luck's important. There's no doubt about that.
You were known for your batting, but I want to ask you about the time you played against India in 2001, and you bowled you only other in Test cricket. How desperate way Australia at the time to throw the ball.
Mason, I've never seen you bowl, but I think you're a much better bowler than me. That's my guess. And I haven't even seen you bowl before, but I think you would be a better bowler than me. This mouse next to my computer is probably a better bowler than me as well. So the very fact that Steve Waugh threw me the ball and I bowled one over, we were desperate. We were absolutely down. And what happened? We were playing against India at Eden Gardens in Calcutta. There was 110,000 people there watching.
No pressure.
Hey?
No pressure.
No pressure. On day 3, we'd made India follow on, and we had Sachin Tendulkar out. India were 4 down. We were about to win our 17th straight test match. We were about to beat India for the first time in 60 years. We're about to have the biggest party of our life. Day 4 comes. Rahul Dravid and VVS Laxman batted all day. We could not get them out. And everyone bowled. I reckon even the umpire got a bowl before me. But Steve Waugh got so desperate, and you weren't there, Mason, so he couldn't throw you the ball because I'm sure you're a good bowler. He threw me the ball, and I got none for 3. 3 singles, but at least I can proudly say I've bowled 1 over in Test cricket. A lot of people haven't done that.
What were you throwing down? Some medium paces? Slow, very slow.
Calling it medium pace is being very light. We call it, we have a thing in cricket called a pie thrower. A pie thrower is the worst bowler in the world. So you could call it medium pace, but I'd call it more of a pie. It was rubbish, and I didn't get a wicket. But having said that, I did get a few first-class wickets, including the greatest all-rounder of our time, Jacques Kallis. I got him out, LBW, at the Gabba one day. Our bowlers all got injured I think Adam Gilchrist was the captain. He threw me the ball, and I got Jacques Kallis LBW. So it's not too bad.
You made your first Ashes appearance in 1998. Can you tell us what makes an Ashes series so special and different from other test matches?
Yes, I think there's great rivalry. Even when I was a little kid, Mason, when I was a little boy, I used to watch on my black and white TV and watch it. We used to be able to get up and have a hot chocolate and watch the Australia versus England in the Ashes, even when we were little kids back here in Australia. So there's great history, there's great rivalry. And when I played my first Ashes test match, it was more special than any test match I ever played. And I think that'll continue. We saw that last summer. It was an amazing test series. And Ashes cricket is just I think it's the rivalry and the history and the bragging rights. The bragging rights for Aussies to say we got the Ashes, or England to say they got the Ashes. That's what makes it so much fun and so competitive.
And Justin, growing up, so I grew up in the 90s, and cricket was my first kind of love of sport is cricket. I love cricket. I play a lot myself. And growing up and watching that team of yourself, Steve, Mark Waugh, Shane Warne, Ponting, Ian Healy, Hayden, Warne, Lee, you could go on for ages. What was that like to kind of be in that team of arguably the greatest Australian team ever?
It was unbelievable. The reason it was so much, there's an old saying, winners have parties, losers have meetings.
You partied a lot. And
when you play with those guys, you have a lot of parties, and that just makes it so much fun. And the really interesting thing for me was that it was so competitive to get into the team. And there's always someone barking at your heels to take your place. So on the field, you had to take it very seriously. You always had to look for ways to get better. If you didn't perform all the time, someone else would take your spot because there was so much competition. I think that's what drove the standard so high. And the other thing is, I was only asked this the other day, what it was about playing in that team. Every time we walked out to play, we expected to win. And there's real power in that. So you feel it in your body language, you feel it in yourself, that even though you get nervous, you're expecting to win because you've got so many great players. And the other thing about it all is they are like my brothers now. I spent more time with them for most of my adult life than I did with my actual brothers and sister and family. So they're like my brothers. We keep in touch a lot. I love them all. They're ripping blokes, and on the field we had a lot of fun, and off the field we had a lot of fun together as well.
And then continuing with the Ashes, I want to take the Boxing Day Test match in 2002. You scored 250. Was that the greatest innings you've had? And if it wasn't, what was?
Well, you see up there, up on top, I think you can see up on top of the bookshelf.
Yep.
There's actually, when I'm walking off the ground, I think Alec Tudor from Surrey's running past, and I just walked off. It's a full crowd. I scored 250. So the thing I remember most of, there's two things I remember most about that innings. First, when I was on 96 or 94, I hit a 6 to bring up my 100. And it was the only time in my life, really, I knew something that no one else in the world knew. And I knew it was going, and there was so I hit the ball. I know it's going for 6, but there's silence. As I hit it off the bat, I'm just sort of going, I know this is going, I know I'm going to be 100. But that 2 or 3 seconds where you're waiting for it to go across and the crowd roars, that was an amazing feeling. So I remember that. And then the other thing I remember about that test match was a great test, but at the end of the test, I was feeling pretty confident. So at the end of day 2, I was feeling pretty confident and pretty happy with myself. I went to the press conference, and just before stumps, every time Brett Lee bowled, the Barmy Army were calling him for no ball, and they said he was throwing. He said they were questioning his action. So I went into the press conference, and I'm talking about, my innings. I got a bit confident, and they asked me about the Barmy Army, and I said something like, well, the Barmy Army, most of them are just 50-kilo overweight clowns who know nothing about cricket. Big mistake. Big mistake. From the next day till every time I played, the Barmy Army used to sing a song about the 7 dwarfs, and I was one of the dwarfs. They used to sing it every time about me being a dwarf. And then they sing a song called "We're 50 kilos overweight, we're 40 kilos overweight, we're 30 kilos overweight, we're 20. Langer, you're a knob, or so you're an idiot or something, whatever it was." And they used to sing it every single time. So what I learned is you never mess with the Barmy Army. You never mess with the Barmy Army. That's the biggest lesson I learned from that innings.
And I imagine you copped a lot of it from the Barmy Army over your time. Did you enjoy that, or did it kind of get to you, or did you enjoy it?
No, I didn't enjoy it at all. It's all funny. Like the funny thing is, I love the music. I love the loyalty. I love the support. All that is brilliant. But when they're singing about you, or when they're singing about your mates, and sometimes there's a bit of a sting to it, that's no fun. People think it's funny, but and it is. It's great. It's great entertainment. But when you're the one on the target, or one of your mates is the targets, then it's no fun, and it wears you down. There's no doubt about that.
Fair enough.
What is the difference between playing Ashes cricket in England compared to Australia?
That was nice and loud.
That's easy. You know what that is? When you play in England, everyone hates you. When you play in Australia, everyone loves you. And when England come over here, besides the Barmy Army, the shoes are on the other foot. So there's a few little different things in the atmosphere, and the ball moves around a bit more on different bounces. But in the end of the day, if Australia play in England, it's really tough. And if England come to Australia, it's really tough, mainly because of the crowds and the media and getting written off all the time. But that's all part of the game.
Was there anything? So we spoke to a lot of English cricketers. We spoke to Nasser Hussain, Michael Atherton, Rob Key, and a few others, and they all said the same. When they went to Australia, there was extra security would take their time checking the bags, and the hotel staff would be rude to them, and little things like that. Was there anything you faced? Obviously, the media wouldn't have been very nice, but is there anything off the pitch in England that kind of happened that made your life extra difficult?
Yeah, I had a stalker actually.
Okay.
I mean, it's a really good story. I think it was the 1997 Ashes, and we're in Leeds, and the Leeds, is it the Leeds Rhinos?
Yeah.
There's a rugby ground out the back.
Yeah.
So at lunch or tea, I wasn't playing, I was 12th man. So I was out the back with the fitness trainer. I was running a lap, doing some boxing, running another lap, doing some boxing, and there's about, I don't know, a big group of English supporters, probably from wherever, and they're all drinking beer, and they were sort of chirping me. And they're going, telling me how rubbish I am and telling I'm useless and telling me all this sort of stuff. And it kept going on and on. And eventually I just ran over there and the fitness trainer started chasing after me. I'm going, mate, you're a coward. You're in front of your mates and da-da-da. I was silly, really, at the time, but you're a coward, mate. I don't know why you're carrying on. He's going, oh, we're just having a laugh. And yeah, but mate, da-da-da. Anyway, the fitness trainer grabbed hold of me. We went back to the change room. We had a laugh about it, no stress. Anyway, the next test match, I'm in the nets practicing. And there's a bloke in there going, the coward's back. The coward's back. It was really weird. And then everywhere I went, he turned up. He turned up everywhere. And he did a Facebook, set up a Facebook account under my name, and he was, sending out all this abusive stuff, and it was really weird. Anyway, I was playing for Somerset, and we're playing at Guildford, and I just scored 300. I think I scored 330, so I'm feeling pretty happy with myself. I'm going back to Australia 3 days later to get ready for the last Ashes series, and I'm just standing at first slip, and guess what? He turned up, him and his 3 mates, and he brought the 7 dwarfs, put them there in the temporary stand. He's shouting abuse, shouting abuse. Anyway, what happened next was fascinating. Our coach, Andy Hurry, ex-Royal Marine, and our fitness trainer, Darren Vaness, used to work on the doors up there north, big bodybuilder and tough, real tough. So I'm standing there and all our players, I wonder what's going to happen next. Next thing we know, Sarge, Andy Hurry starts walking that way around the oval. Darren Vaness starts walking that way around the oval. And they sit behind the stalker and his 3 mates. And we're all going, what is going to happen now? Anyway, next thing you know, Sarge puts his arm around the stalker's neck. This is 7 years I'm talking about, 7 years of stalker. Puts his arm around his shoulder and whispers in his ear. And he whispered for not 10 seconds, he whispered in his ear for about 2 minutes. Next thing, the stalker picks up his 7 dwarfs and his 3 mates and left. I've never, ever heard from him ever again. And guess what happened next? That night, I signed for Somerset and played for the next 3 years. And we had an amazing run because of that loyalty and that if they're going to have my back, I have their back. So, you used to get that. And I know England talk about the Australian crowds. We feel exactly the same. When we came, I've just finished watching the David Beckham documentary. I found it intriguing. And I just finished watching the Robbie Williams documentary. I found it intriguing, right? But when Steve Smith and David Warner came back after their ban from Sandpapergate, the abuse they received in England, I still can't believe it. It was disgusting behaviour. So, we all have our stories to tell. But in the end of the day, what I will say about playing cricket in England, I've got some of my greatest friends are in England. Well, I played county cricket for Middlesex for 3 years. I played 3 years for Somerset, 3.5 years for Somerset. I played 3 or 4 Ashes series. I love England. I played club cricket in Dover. I played club cricket in London. I played club cricket in Scotland. I love England. So I can say 100,000 million times more good things about England I can say about the bad things. There's no doubt about that.
Good. Brilliant. We're just going to move a little bit away from your career. We've got a few random questions. Okay. Kind of a would you rather game, if that's okay.
All right.
So, a night in or night out?
A night in, definitely.
A beach holiday or a city break?
A beach holiday any day of the week.
Would you rather talk to animals or speak every single language?
I'd like to talk to animals, actually. I love my dogs, and I just love to be able to talk and know what they're thinking sometimes.
Would you rather explore space or explore the bottom of the ocean?
Explore space. In Perth, in Western Australia, we have big sharks. I'm now scared of sharks. So I reckon I'd rather explore space than the bottom of the ocean.
And would you rather go forward 200 years and see your future family or go back 200 years and meet your ancestors?
I think I'd rather go forward 200 years and meet my family.
Brilliant. Okay, right. So sticking with the Ashes, and sorry, but we have to bring it up, being from England. 2005 Ashes series.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, and not just because England won, but in my opinion, it's the greatest Ashes series that I've seen. Just because of the drama, every game apart from the first one could have gone either way. The result didn't obviously go your way, but how do you look back on that Ashes series?
Yeah, an amazing series. Even that first test you said that wasn't close. If you remember, the first session was the best session of cricket I ever played in my life. It was absolutely brilliant. I've never felt pressure like it. It was amazing. But it was a great series. I also remember the next test, Glenn McGrath. I was standing almost as close to you are to Mason. Glenn McGrath stood on the cricket ball and did his ankle. I could not believe it. And it was almost like from that millisecond, things changed. So it was an unbelievable series. That was when Andy Flintoff, who was probably in the top 3 bowlers I ever faced, he had a huge impact on the series. I love everything about Andrew Flintoff. I just love the way he plays the game. He was horrible to face because he always smiled at you. When you're facing fast bowling, you want to be grumpy and mean, and so you can get in the fight. Andy Flintoff just always smiled all the time. So he was, but a brilliant cricketer and loved his spirit. Yeah, that was an amazing test series. So I agree with you. It was disappointing to lose it, but it was a great privilege to be a part of it.
After the first test in 2005, Australia won. Why did you decide to go into the England changing room after the game to sing your team song and your regret during that?
You know, in life, you do some things that you probably look back on and go, that wasn't the greatest idea. We're playing great cricket. When you win, everyone gets pretty excited. So yeah, looking back on it, probably wasn't a great thing, but we'll admit that. We'll put our, there's always, you've got to have a degree of humility. There's no doubt about it. The great champions have humility. And on that occasion, when you've had a few beers, you think it's a funny thing to do. And there wouldn't be one man or one woman, lady actually, on this podcast, listen to the podcast, who hasn't done some silly things in their lives. And whilst it was fun at the time, yeah, it was probably silly looking back on it.
And then
research, Mason, you've done your research here. Well done.
Yeah, so not all day yesterday, but yesterday we spent a lot of time looking at YouTube and old interviews, and yeah, so the students enjoyed doing the research, which is good.
Mason, can you please make sure when you speak to all your friends, I say thank you for being so well researched, and that's why this is such a great podcast.
There we go. Do you want this one then? So moving on to better times for you now, Justin.
Then regained.
So you then regained.
You then regained the Ashes a few years later, smashing England 5-0. It is, in fact, your favourite Ashes series, and if not, what was?
Yeah, I think it was my favourite Ashes series. One, because that really hurt when we lost in 2005, and we almost made a commitment to each other that we were going to do whatever we could to win back the Ashes before we retired. And what happened at the end of that series, the great Shane Warne and the great Glenn McGrath retired in Sydney, and I was lucky to retire on the same day as those three. So, and to win at 5-0, not many athletes in life, in any sport, get to go out with a fairy tale finish. And the three of us were really fortunate to go out with a fairy tale finish. To play so well with our mates and to fight back after losing that tough series. It was nice to go out with a fairy tale ending, I would say.
Definitely. I said, yeah, probably a 5% less than that get to go out on top, don't they? So no,
I think that's
good.
Actually, if for a second, if we get a little bit serious, that I think that's why so many athletes have a bit of a chip on their shoulder, because they either get dropped or they get injured or they rarely finish the way they would love to finish. And, it's really sad because it's a tough business. I mean, professional sports is a tough business, but in my case, I was very, very fortunate.
And then being an opening batsman, you would have had lots of great battles with some great opening bowlers. And yesterday, when we were doing our research, we noticed one kept coming up, and that was Shoaib Akhtar, the fast bowler of Pakistan. What was it like facing? You must have faced some incredible fast bowlers, and what was it like, kind of maybe facing Shoaib Akhtar and some other top really fast bowlers?
Well, when you face fast bowlers, one thing, you're alive. The adrenaline's pumping, you're nervous, your feet, your toes are twiddling on the dirt, you're getting ready. But what I learned though is if you learn how to see, no matter how fast the bowler was, if you saw the ball come out of their fingers, and you learn that skill, if you see it come out of their fingers, it was almost like slow motion, because our bodies become like a computer to batting. So the whole idea was to see it, the ball released out of the fingers, then you get into position, you move into good areas. But when you weren't concentrating, you didn't see it at the finger. It was like being in a fast forward cartoon, and you got hit on the body, or worse, you got out. So the whole idea was to see the ball out of the bowler's hand. But it was awesome. I mean, it was scary. Anyone who tells you it wasn't scary is lying straight up. There was, degrees of fear there about getting hit, but that kept you sharp and that kept you on your toes. And looking back on it, I miss it so much.
You still play cricket at all?
No, I don't. But I miss the contest. I miss the fight. I miss the adrenaline of facing fast bowling.
I'm sure there's not even a club cricket in Australia.
No, I don't play anymore. I'm too old. I'm 53 now. But I in my 100th Test match, before that last Ashes series, I got hit really badly in the back of the helmet. And it was my first ball of the Test match in Johannesburg in South Africa. I got hit and I was concussed. I was knocked out and didn't play any more part in the game. So after that point, it took a lot to get back on the horse, as they say. It was scary. Every time I faced a fast bowler, there was a much larger degree of fear there. So I had to learn how to cope with that. And that was all part of mental conditioning and mental toughness again, and mainly learning how to watch the ball closely again.
Brilliant. And again, when we were doing our research, a stat that surprised me, because I just presumed to be a lot more, is you played 8 one-day internationals. We had to look a few times on different websites, because I just presumed you played loads more than that. So why do you think you didn't play as many one-day internationals as maybe you should have? Or
I think it's so much about timing in this. Like when I was Mark Waugh and Adam Gilchrist, they were the opening batters for Australia, and then you had Ricky Ponting, and then after that, Matty Hayden got in with Adam Gilchrist, and there just wasn't a position. I had a really good record in domestic cricket, county cricket, for WA. I had really good record in one-day cricket. Loved one-day cricket, but it was just about opportunity. It was hard to take, but it is what it is. And because I didn't play the many one-day internationals, it meant I got to play a lot of county cricket, and I loved playing county cricket. It was almost addictive to me at county cricket, because you play so much, and it was I just loved it. I loved everything about playing county cricket.
Do you still hold the record for the most first-class runs?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So that's a great honour, and I always joke though, because in my last season playing for Somerset, I went past Sir Donald Bradman. But I joke to people, it took me about 2,000 innings. It took him about 200 innings to make 28,000 runs or whatever. So there's certainly I've got a beautiful, in my office here, I've got a beautiful letter that I received from Sir Donald Bradman. And I wrote him a letter in 1995. And what was most amazing was I got a reply the very next day. So if in my office, you can maybe see up there's another baggy green cap. And under that baggy green cap, there's a letter, my letter from Sir Donald Bradman to Sir Donald Bradman, and his reply later. So I cherish that. And just for me, it probably just means I played a lot of first-class cricket.
Wow. And scored a lot of runs. Right, one more question for me, Mason, then we'll move on to you. So last year, we sadly lost arguably the greatest cricketer of all time in Shane Warne. So growing up, he was one of my heroes. I had the pleasure of meeting him when he came to Cardiff one time. When the Australian team came to Cardiff, can't remember when it was, but it was a pleasure meeting Shane then. What was he like not as a cricketer, because we all know how amazing cricketer he was. What was he like as a person?
When we were both 18 years old, we lived together. We went to the Australian Institute of Sport Cricket Academy, and our dwellings was a pub. We lived in a pub, and it was so much fun. And every night, Warner used to sit in the public bar. He used to have a cigarette in one hand and maybe a little thing of beer in the other. And he used to bowl. He used to spin his leg spinner into the left pocket. He used to spin his wrong or googly into the right pocket. He used to bowl his flipper back up and down the table. And that was Shane Warne. He'd do it that was just him. Like a cigarette in one hand, a beer in the other hand, practicing his leg spin. But he was so caring. He was so kind, and he was so loyal. And it was a great shock when he passed away. And actually the day before he died, Rod Marsh also died, another legend of Australian cricket, who probably had more influence on my cricket career than any person in my life, Rod Marsh. So to lose those two friends and mentors and, legends of Australia in 2 days was really sad. Then, of course, we lost Andrew Simons, who was one of the great people of our time as well. So it was a really tough time in Australian cricket. But Warne, and I always say this as well, Shane Warne, not only he gave me so many highlights on the cricket field because we won. The best thing I ever did was play cricket with Shane Warne because we won all the time. He was a genius, but he also gave me the highlight of my whole life. Because of Shane Warne, I got to hug Liz Hurley. I got to hug Liz Hurley because Shane was engaged to Liz Hurley. Like, man. And I hugged her. It was brilliant. And when I think about it, because of Warner, we got to meet rock stars, and we got to meet legends because he was like a rock star himself. So Shane, I was with his two daughters and his son and his ex-wife Simone just last week at the Coldplay concert. We had a great weekend together. But he's sadly missed because he was you don't say legend or icon very often. He was certainly that.
No, he definitely was. Amazing.
What is the one question that you would never answer?
The one question I would never answer, there is no question I would never answer. You can ask me, people can ask me whatever they want. And that's often when I speak or I write, people go, I can't believe you're so honest. And I said, well, that's the only way, isn't it? I remember having, I'm not sure what football team you both barrack for, but I had lunch with Sir Alex Ferguson before the 4th Test match at Old Trafford a couple of years ago. And the one thing Alex Ferguson said to me was, remember, truth works. Always tell the truth. And I thought that was so powerful. Another thing Alex Ferguson taught me was that he said when they lost a game, Manchester, when they lost a game, he got into the habit where he'd always go back into his office and ask the question, what could I have done better? What most people do when you lose is they point at everyone else, what everyone else could have done better. But he said, I always ask myself what I could have done better. I love that. So, Mason, you or your mates or your friends can ask me any question. There's none that I wouldn't answer for you.
Brilliant. Well, we'll look forward to it. So moving on then to your retirement, and after you retired, you moved into coaching with Western Australia. How did you find the transition from player to coach?
Well, one thing, nothing ever replaces playing. I'd say that for the first thing. The second thing is it was great to still be involved in the game. It was great to be able to share experiences that you'd learned from the game, but nothing replaces. And the other thing, as you keep moving up as a coach, when you become a head coach, often you stop doing what you love doing, and that's coaching people. Because, and especially in the Australian team, you spend more time managing so many different stakeholders that you get away from doing what you love, which is actually coaching and teaching and helping people. So, but look, I'm very fortunate. I've loved my time coaching. I met some great people. I'm still in the game, but I'd say nothing replaces playing.
In 2010, it is right that you applied to become coach of Australia. How was that process for you, and why do you think they didn't go for you at the time?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Mason. Thanks for asking. And what I will say is that I did apply. What happened is that the head coaching role, and I don't literally only been, the reason I started coaching was that Ricky Ponting, who was the captain, and Tim Nielsen at the time was the coach, I was still playing at Somerset. And they said, when you retire at the end of the year, why don't you come and join us in the Australian team as a batting mentor? And I didn't think too much of it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then sure enough, when I retired, I got a phone call the next day from Cricket Australia saying, do you want to come and coach with the Australian cricket team? So I did that. And I'd been doing it for about 1 year. And then the head coach job came up and everyone's going, oh, you should apply for it. So I did, but I was miles off. I'm so glad I didn't get given the job back then. I probably wouldn't be talking to you today, Mason. I'd probably have died a long time ago, because what happened, I then went and coached Western Australia for 6 or 7 years, and that was a brilliant apprenticeship. And I always say to young people, there is nothing like doing an apprenticeship, or in whatever you do. We all want to be the boss from day one, but the apprenticeship is so important to learn all the skills. So I did that through Western Australia, and then I was lucky 6 or 7 years later to get appointed, and I'm glad I didn't get appointed in the first case.
Yes, so as you mentioned, in 2018, you became coach of Australia in difficult circumstances. I don't know if you agree. Yeah, after the sandpaper, the gate issue. Talking about the sandpaper issue first, why? I know you weren't coach at the time, but why? What must have gone through the player's head to think to do that and they would get away with it?
Yeah, look, it's really hard, because I obviously wasn't there. I was as shocked as everyone. And in Australia, it was one of the greatest controversies in Australian history. The reaction was unbelievable. And I actually, talking to players at the time who were in South Africa, I don't think they realised at the moment how big it was back here, but it was huge. And one thing, and we always say Australians play hard, but you don't cheat. And we get taught that. We get brought up knowing you don't cheat. And the boys did, and they paid a really heavy price for it. Steve Smith had 1 year ban, David Warner a year ban, Cameron Bancroft had a 9-month ban. We lost at the time. The chairman changed, the CEO changed, the high performance manager changed, the head coach changed, so all the leadership. So Australian cricket reacted very sternly, and we had to have a clean start. And one thing I know is that at the very start, the new chairman and the CEO said, we don't care if about winning and losing, we just want to get back the Australian public to start respecting us again. And I reckon I said every day of my time coaching, behind closed doors and publicly, we're going to make Australians proud of this cricket team, and that's what we did. And I believe you can have both. You can play well and be good people and play in the right spirit. So hopefully we achieve that.
Yeah, I definitely did. And is it true that you picked Cameron Bancroft up at the airport and after that, and what was that like, and what was that car journey like?
No, that's right. We did. I mean, I'd known Cameron Bancroft since 16, and the sad thing about it was that you could line up 1,000 22-year-olds, and he would have been the last person I would say would ever do that. And I remember talking to him, and I asked him straight away, what happened? And when we first spoke on the phone in South Africa, he made up some story. And when we got to back to the airport that day, he took me before we went out, because there was obviously lots of media everywhere. We went out a little private exit, and he took me into a little room in this VIP area of the airport. And he said, and he got, quite emotional. He said, one of the worst things here, I didn't tell you the truth, coach. And that's a good lesson. We go back to Alex Ferguson, truth works. So, but, he's a terrific kid. He's like Steve Smith and David Warner they've done their time. He's batting brilliantly now. He's done a lot of things to make up for the mistake he made. And I've got a lot of time and respect for Cameron Bancroft.
How you had a tough job of picking Australia cricket up from a dog place. How did you try to do that? And how do you change the quarter?
How do you change the culture?
How do you change your culture?
Another good question, Mason. And all culture is behaviour. If you behave well, you've got a good culture. If you behave poorly, you've got a poor culture. So put it all down to behaviour. So we just made sure that the expectations from everyone was very clear of the behaviours we expected on and off the cricket field. And I go back to those make Australians proud. And I would say to the players, if you wake up every day and you make your grandparents, your parents, your brothers and sisters, or your mates, or your aunties and uncles, in your behaviours, you make them proud, everything will be okay. It's a really simple philosophy, because they don't want to see you lose all the time. That won't make them proud. So you've still got to play well, but you've also got to behave well. And that's all, in my opinion, that's what culture is. And you've got to be on those behaviours every single day. And what a lot of people do, they look for the bad behaviours. But that's not necessarily the way to go either. You've got to, if someone behaves well, you've got to put your arm around and say, well done. That's the behaviour we're looking for. If they don't, sometimes it'll remind them that that's not the behaviour we're looking for. But you've got to also encourage the good behaviours. And what I've learned is the more you encourage the good behaviours, it's a much more powerful way of building a strong culture than always just looking for bad behaviours, which most organisations do. So we reward the good behaviours and reward people who are, doing the right thing on and off the field. And generally, to me, that helps create a great environment to be a part of.
What is your biggest weakness as a coach, and what do you do to try and improve it?
My biggest weakness as a coach is when we lose, I go very quiet. And people have this, some people react differently, but I'm quite introverted. You asked me a question before, would you rather have a night in or a night out? And I said instantly, I have a night in, because I like to be thinking. And when we lose, I go quiet, and people think I'm grumpy, or people think I'm hard to approach. But it usually takes me, I don't know, sometimes 1 hour, sometimes 6 hours, sometimes a good night's sleep, and then I'm back into it. I'm like an energizer battery again. But in those periods when we lose, I'm always thinking about ways we can do it better. So, but I'd go quiet, and I'd say that's my biggest weakness, and I'm very aware of it. So how do I improve that? One, I was aware of it. I knew it was happening, and it's over time, hopefully I've got better at it. But we've all got weaknesses, no question about that, and that'd be my biggest weakness.
You called one of the players in your team a coward for leaking information to the press. Wow. Who were you talking about, and why did you call them a coward?
One of the great things I've learned in life is I actually never said that. Okay. I didn't even, and the way the media works today, like if you, I did a podcast for a friend of mine, and we laughed for an hour and 10 minutes. It was the funniest podcast of all time. It was leading up to last summer. I was to start to do some commentary. And then it is impossible for anyone to put together that I called any of our players a coward. It would never happen. I'd never done it. I love my players, but that was the headline. And I said something 5 minutes before in a question, and I said something 5 minutes later, and they somehow intertwined it to have that headline. But it made a good headline, and it made there was a bit of angst between the players for a few seconds until we talked about context and talked about the truth. Truth always works. But made a good. What I did say was that often you read in the newspaper, journalists write, a source says. A source says this, a source says, but they never put their name to it. So what I said was, in my opinion, the sources are like cowards, because they're either if they don't want to put their name to it, well, that's soft or weak. And if they've got something to say, they should come and say it to people, and they should be upfront, or they've got an agenda, or they're trying to hurt someone. So that's what I was saying, but never ever about our players. I never say that about our players. I've got a great relationship, despite what you read in the newspaper. I'm still in touch with 98% of the players. I love them. They're great, and they're doing a great job in the World Cup. We've got great memories together, and but the media has a way of building good news stories.
And then as well, you were involved with the Australian Amazon Prime documentary. How did you feel about that at the time, and having the cameras kind of everywhere you went and people being able to see behind the scenes?
It was really hard. I mean, it was perfect timing during COVID, and a lot of people around the world watched it. So I was in London in June, and the amount of people would stop me on the street and say, I love that document. Chris Martin from Coldplay and Phil, his manager, all they wanted to talk to me about last weekend at the Coldplay after the Cold was the Amazon documentary. So it went brilliantly, but it's nerve-wracking. You imagine if a cameraman is filming you 24 or every waking hour, he's filming what you're doing. And they did that for 18 months. So while the cameraman, Doco, we called him Doco because he's making a documentary, he's actually a stand-up comic. So every day he'd do the joke of the day for us in the Australian cricket team. How he had so many jokes, I've got no idea. But he was a great bloke. We loved him. But the day he stopped filming was a huge relief, to be honest.
And were you aware of it? Did you have to change your behaviour, or were you the same Justin Langer you always are?
Yeah, hopefully it come across that I was just, and I think that's what people love so much about the documentary, that everyone was so authentic about it. And by the end of it, we didn't really know. A couple of times I had to say, oh, Doc, no, we're not filming this. Can you? And he was so respectful. But overall, I'd like to think, I don't know any other way, actually. So people see the grumpiness, people see the happiness, people see the passion, people see all of it. That's just me. And hopefully that's how it was portrayed in the documentary.
Brilliant. We've got a few more questions, Justin, that's okay?
How important is
honesty
in a dressing room?
Well, like I say, honesty to me is the number one value in life. It's so important. So, and honesty goes both ways. Is what you learn as a head coach is you're going to have a lot of tough conversations. You got to drop people, you got to leave people out, and all the players think they should be playing, which is great. But what I've learned is if you can look someone in the eyes and tell them the truth, then you can't go wrong. But the other side of it, like Alex Ferguson, you've also got to be very honest with yourself. So honesty works both ways, and it's the number one value for me in creating a strong environment.
And then how has the changing room changed? So put yourself back to 1999 or whatever, when you were in the changing room as a young man, to kind of when you were a coach. How has the dressing room evolved in that time? And
it's so different. My gosh, like when honestly, Alan Border was my first captain, and I love Alan Border. He was my hero. He's my captain, but he was tough. He was tough. As was David Boone, and you just sat there and you just listened and you just sat there. You didn't say a word, and you just learned from watching what great players did. And they used to just, and it wasn't as professional back then, certainly in terms of money value, but it was just so different. Now today, they're very inclusive change rooms. There seems to be very little hierarchy. Everyone just gets on, and that's a really, I think that's indicative of our society today, actually. So a changing room basically just mirrors what's happening in society at the time. So it was very different, but I was lucky to live through and still live in all these different eras and still be involved in the game.
And then you were sacked, or you left Cricket Australia after 4 years in charge. You had just won the World Cup, just won the 2020 World Cup, #1 team in the world. Why on earth would they sack you?
I think we talked about before, there was this media storm, and we see it all the time. I mean, and when you're in the media storm, it's like literally standing in the middle of a bushfire, and there's nothing you can do about it. And the more you talk, the fire just grows. And I think it gets to a point where it almost becomes untenable. Some of the things I read in the paper, but literally I could not believe what I was reading. But it just turns into a better story, and Chinese whispers become a better story and a better story and a better story. And then by the end of it, it was best for everyone that I moved on. So, but I had 4 great years there. We had great success, and yeah, I mean, that's part and parcel. No matter how you look at it, if you want to live in the public eye, you want to coach the Australian cricket team, or you want to be a rock star, or you want to captain England in any code, that's great, but you've got to be ready, because the storm or the bushfire is coming. And it's sad to say that, but look at anyone who really makes it to the top. There's very few who go out the Cinderella story. And there's a great friend of mine who's in the SAS, which is like the Royal Marines. And he said to me years ago, Justin, most people can live the dream. Not many people can live the reality. So we all want to be the head coach. We all want to be the captain, or we all want to be the CEO, or we all want to be the headmaster, or we all want to drive a Mercedes-Benz, or we all want to live in a mansion. We all want that. That's easy. We can dream about that. But the reality of that, what you've got to do to get it, and when you become a leader, the sacrifice and the discipline and the criticism and the disappointments and the hard work, man, it's not for the faint-hearted. Leadership is not for the faint-hearted, and that's okay. I wouldn't change it. Even though it was tough in the media, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Would you ever go back, or would you ever coach a different country?
No, I'm going to coach in the IPL this year. I'm doing so many. After 30 years, I'm finally home. And the last 2 years I've been home. I see my kids every day. I have home cooked meals most nights. I just love being back at home. So the IPL is 10 weeks away, not 10 months. My first year coaching Australia, I was away 300 days of the year. So it's a big sacrifice. So you never say never, but I'll get I'm really looking forward to coaching the IPL. I'm really looking forward to coaching with the Lucknow Super Giants. It's going to be fun, and it's a real challenge, but I can't see myself going on the road full time again.
So that is our next question. So you've been appointed coach of the Lucknow Super Giants in the IPL, Indian Premier League, for next year. How are you feeling about that? And also, which player in world cricket would be your first pick to be on your side, and why?
I'm really excited about it. I've got the juices pumping again for coaching. I've had 2 years out, so I've got lots of energy for it. If I could have one player now in world cricket, I'd have Ben Stokes.
Why?
Ben Stokes. I just love. I mean, I was obviously there when he played that amazing innings in a couple of years ago. I mean, that broke our heart. It was unbelievable. But what people didn't realise was the day before, I think he bowled a 10 or a 12 over spell, to get 2 wickets at the end of play, which set them up to win that game as well. So it was just his batting, which everyone remembers, but his bowling the day before was unbelievable. So I just love his competitive spirit. I love the way he can bat and bowl and field. He's been a good captain for England. And yeah, I just really admire him.
And we mentioned, I think before we even started recording, about Mark Wood, who plays for the Lucknow Super Giants. Is he, I don't quite know how it works. Obviously, there's draft. Is he back with you, or have you got to pick him again, or he's back with you?
Yeah, we retained him this year. On Sunday we had to release our players or retain them. Mark Wood's been retained. I know he's been on your podcast before. He's so much fun. He bowls fast, he bowls fast, not just fast. He's super quick. So to have him in the team, and they tell me he's full of energy. I only watched him play against us. I'm looking forward to having him on my team, not playing against him.
Yeah, he was a brilliant character, wasn't he, Mason? Lots of funny stories, which was, he's a really, really good person. Right, we've come into the end now, Justin. So what we like to do on our podcast is get our previous guest to think of a question to ask our next guest. So Our previous guest was a former professional football player, Sam Aston, who played for Sunderland and Wrexham. And he asks, can you tell me about one time in your career where you felt most vulnerable?
Well, I can answer that twice. The first time or the last time was that last 6 months of coaching Australia, because I felt everything was out of my control. And that's a horror. Even though we were winning everything. And I'd made some, you always adapt, you always evolve. And I felt I'd never enjoyed coaching more. And yet I still got, I finished as I did. So I was very vulnerable because so much was out of my control. Not on the field, not within the change room, but outside. So that was vulnerable. And I think the most vulnerable, I felt vulnerable twice. I was dropped after 5 test matches and never thought I'd play again. But I used that vulnerability and that disappointment as fire. It was like fuel to just keep getting better and better and better. And then in 2001, during the Ashes, I got dropped for the first test, and I'm 31. We talked about it earlier in this interview. I'm gone. I'm never playing for again. And that's like the dream's over. But I just worked harder and harder. I learned about what men don't do much is talk. And I didn't talk for about 6 weeks. Even though I was training hard, I was getting worse and worse and worse. I was under so much pressure and I couldn't make any runs. And then I sat down with Steve Waugh, the captain. I sat down with Adam Gilchrist and the coach, John McGinn. I actually talked. And men don't talk enough. But when I did that, I went from feeling rock bottom to, it was like the biggest relief. And then 2 weeks later, I opened the batting, got a bit of luck, scored 100, and then opened with my great mate, Matty Hayden, for the rest of my career. So vulnerability, it hurts at the time, but it's really important for you to progress and develop and get better, I think.
Brilliant. And then could you do the same for us, please, Justin? Can you think of a question for our next guest, who is a sports person? We're not going to tell you who they are, but think any question. Hasn't got to be anything to do with sports. It can be anything you want.
And my question to the next guest is, what is your favorite quote or your favorite philosophy in life?
Brilliant.
So mine is the pain of discipline is nothing like the pain of disappointment. So I'm interested what their favorite quote or their favorite motto or their favorite mantra or their favorite philosophy is for how they live their life.
I would just like to say a big thank you again to everyone who listens to your podcast. We really appreciate it. Please continue to leave reviews and pass our podcast into your friends and family. Thank you so much for talking to the time to chat with us today. Justin, we really enjoy speaking with you, and it means so much to us as a school to be able to have a
opportunity
to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mason. And I think one day you're going to be a great podcast presenter. Well done. Your communication was excellent. And I'm very, very, very thankful to you and your friends to come up with such good questions and to invite me on your podcast. Thank you so much. Hopefully we can meet face to face one day, Mason.
Brilliant.